So many people play up the whole thing in their heads before applying. And then for that reason, and that's the tip number 2 here, because we have a tendency to have a negative bias when we're thinking, we think about all of the bad things that can happen, all of the difficulties that we will encounter. And it's, again, natural to have a negative bias. And then you decide that you don't want the job even before applying, when in fact, my advice to all job hunters is exactly what you said. Give it a go.
Hi, I'm Renata Bernardi, and this is the Job Hunting Podcast, where I interview experts and professionals and discuss issues that are important for job hunters and those who are working to advance their careers. So make sure that you subscribe and follow, and let's dive right in. Today we have a very different episode on the Job Hunting Podcast, where I have swapped chairs with a past guest, Michelle Redfern. She's a guest from episode 37, and she is interviewing me. Michelle has recently launched her own podcast together with her business partner, Mel Butcher, and they are killing it. Sticking to their strength in supporting women in leadership, they have lined up a great list of guests, so I recommend that you check it out, follow, subscribe, and leave them your support in the form of a 5-star ranking and a great review if you enjoy what they're doing. The podcast name is Lead to Soar, and you will find it wherever you found the Job Hunting Podcast. Because, nothing makes a podcast host happier than receiving feedback. And believe me, it's a lonely job here. We are self-isolating for what seems like eons. And the podcasting is also very lonely as a job. So sending us your appreciation will be fantastic. If you haven't done that for the Job Hunting Podcast, may I suggest that you do it too. If you love this show, if you've been listening for a while and you're learning from it, I'd love for you to give me a 5-star ranking and write a short review. It would only take you 5 minutes. You can do that on Apple, and I think Spotify now also has a review format. So I'd love to hear from you. Please send it to me. Fear of success, why it happens and how to overcome it. So that was episode 100 from 2021. If you haven't listened to it, please go back and listen to it. It's a great episode. And Michelle, who's a friend of the podcast, listened and loved it. So that's what she said. And she invited me to continue to talk about fear of success in her podcast, Lead to Soar. So I will tell you a little bit about Michelle and a little bit about what she does, and then we will listen to our conversation, which I thought was really, really interesting. Michelle Redfern is the founder of Advancing Women, an enterprise providing research and advisory service on workplace gender equality, inclusion, and diversity. She is the co-host of A Career That Soars, the founder of women's network Women Who Get It, and the co-founder of CDW, Culturally Diverse Women. And she is, of course, the host of Lead to Soar. She's an experienced non-executive director with board and advisory roles in finance, sport, for purpose, and supply chain sectors. She is a proud ambassador for flexible working days and girls' uniform agenda. She has held several executive leadership roles at ASX-listed companies and FTSE-listed companies such as NAB and Telstra and Serco during her 30-year corporate career. She's also a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors and holds an executive MBA. In fact, we discussed that in our episode 37, so go back and listen to it. She holds several accreditations in organizational diversity and coaching, and she's a very much on-demand speaker and a regular contributor to discussions and advocacy for gender equality and inclusion in sport and in business workplaces. And the Lead to Soar podcast is for career women looking to advance in an organization. The show is hosted by Michelle and by Mel Butcher and is a production of A Career That Soars. As I mentioned before, this interview in its entirety is on Michelle's podcast, Lead to Soar, and there's a link to it in the episode show notes. I have edited her introduction and with her blessing, and I'm repurposing it for you to listen to here in the Job Hunting Podcast. So my conversation with Michelle in its entirety is in her podcast show, Lead to Soar, and I have edited out the intro and the outro from her show with her blessing.
I am repurposing it for you to listen to here in the Job Hunting Podcast. I believe that our conversation is great for all my listeners, not just for women out there, but I strongly recommend that the women listening to my show sign up for Lead to Soar and listen to some great episodes there. I really enjoyed the one that's called Agile Leader, and there's another one called Giving and Receiving Feedback. These are not topics that I would definitely be doing here in the Job Hunting Podcast, but I think that they're very complementary to the conversations that we have here on this show. So without further ado, please listen, and I hope you enjoy this lively chat. You will be able to tell that Michelle and I, we bounce off each other and our energy just like snowballs, and it gets bigger and bigger as we discuss a topic. I really love our chat, and I hope that you enjoy it too. So here it is.
Today, I've got the amazing Renata with me, as you've already heard, and we're going to tap into her zone of genius, her wisdom around job hunting. Now, not necessarily what you might think around, the process and what have you, which of course Renata is an absolute expert at, and we're going to explore that. But we're going to talk about what happens when you're scared. And we had a conversation offline about imposter syndrome, and we said we weren't going to use that expression, but there you go, I just have. But what happens when we're scared of being successful, and what do we do about that? So that's what we're going to be talking about. But Renata, first thing I want to ask you, obviously after saying welcome again, because you're a great friend of A Career That Soars and the Lead to Soar podcast. Remember the days when we go to parties and dinner parties and networking events, when you did that and you wandered up to someone new or someone wandered up to you and they said, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. Who are you and what do you do?" What do you say?
That's funny because since I've gone 100% into career coaching, I actually haven't been out and about, in social settings because of our very long lockdown in Melbourne. But I do introduce myself online all the time because that's how I reach out to potential clients and broader community. I want to support as many professionals as I can. The way that I explain myself is this: I'm a former executive and former CEO who has now decided to dedicate her time to helping other people advance in their careers. So I do a lot of work with professionals that are in transition. They may be going from one job to another, one career to another, one sector to another. And I really like to explain my coaching as specialized in that transition period. It usually involves recruitment and selection process or promotion, but most likely the person is not employed or very keen to move out of their organization and go somewhere else. It could be a similar job somewhere else or a completely different job altogether. And I help people with that transition. And the reason why I am an expert in it, I believe, is because I've done that many, many, many times myself. So I moved countries, I changed careers, I changed jobs, and I did that in different ways as well. I sought out opportunities. So I went seeking for opportunities, or somebody tapped on my shoulder and let me know that there was something happening. I was made redundant. I left jobs. And that variety, I think, is a lived experience that I can now translate into a framework, which I've done many years ago when I was the MBA Monash Career Manager. And since then, I've been coaching on the side throughout my career, because that was years ago, 2008-9. And now since COVID started and I lost most of my consulting retainers, I decided, you know what? I love this. I've always wanted to do it. I'll do it full time. And I haven't looked back, and I'm completely busy. So
just as you were talking, I had a mental sort of map opening up in my, I'm quite visual, and I was thinking, so we often get coaching, executive coaching, when we're in a job, whether that's having been in it for a while or we want to address a certain thing. We often get coaching when we start a new job because we go, okay, I want to have a mentor or a coach to help me gain the confidence, skills, whatever it may be. But that transition period, that I'm ready for a move, I'm ready for a change, I'm ready to enter into the processes around being a job hunter, is so incredibly important. And if I think about my own experiences, can be a little bit daunting. And I don't know if you experience this as well, Renata. So you and I have talked often about the fact we have quite similar appetite for risk. So we like to jump and find new things, but we know when we're ready to jump. But I can honestly say I don't know that I've ever had someone coach me in that transition period. What does that sort of look like? Or when do our listeners know that I'm at this point, this transition point, and I need to talk to Renata? What would they be typically feeling, experiencing, or wanting to do, I guess?
Well, usually people reach out to me when I believe it's a bit too late. But then it's up to me as a coach to educate executives on the importance of bringing somebody like me on board even before they get themselves into a pickle. I say a bit too late because they may have been job hunting for quite some time unsuccessfully. Sometimes they are successful at specific bottlenecks, so they can convert from job application to an interview, but never from an interview to a job. Sometimes they can't convert from a job application to an interview. Sometimes they want to job hunt, but they feel like they don't know where to start. So they're procrastinating for years. The great thing about engaging a coach that's so specifically focused on this issue is it's potentially going to save you a lot of time, because eventually you may learn how to conquer those bottlenecks and qualify for the next round and the next round, but it could take longer. So my goal is to bring that new job or new opportunity sooner so that the client is making more income sooner and not unemployed for longer. And so you're investing in a coach to gain the knowledge, the skills, and the understanding of how recruitment and selection works so that you can fast forward your goals. And the other reason why people hire me is, like I said, is because they might be so confused about their current jobs and they don't really know what's out there for them. They may have been in a job for decades sometimes, and they have never really been in that risky situation that you and I have. And for them, it's really daunting. So having somebody holding their hand and saying, okay, now you have to do this and now you have to do that. There's a certain etiquette on dealing with hiring managers and recruiters that people sometimes don't understand. And there's a certain best practices in networking and job applications and job interviews. And I find that it's really interesting that some people may have been very successful in their jobs, great executives, but never really gone through or completely understood how to transition. So even though I could be a coach that does more than that, I'm very happy to be known and be an expert in this specific area of an executive's career, and frankly refer my clients back to you, Michelle, if they get a job and find that they're having problems leading, and that sort of long-term but very important work that they need to do in their leadership development, for example. I'm happy to refer them to a career that soars.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that there are many of us, and I certainly include myself in that, who have perhaps been in an employer or within in jobs for, as you said, decades. And I've often been invited, Michelle, come and do this job. We need you to fix this. So I certainly was not a practiced job hunter. Well, by the time I got to my mid-40s, now I've got to say I'm also very fortunate that I didn't have to become one, but I certainly know, in fact, a story's coming to mind of one of our members in A Career That Soars, who is a very senior woman in the tech sector. And now I'm trying to think, it was some phenomenal amount of job applications that she's put in. And 127 keeps coming to my mind, but it was, it's in the hundreds and not successful. And you just think, wow, it's interesting hearing you talk about the etiquette and the process and that, I guess it's the unknown. So a couple of things there. One, you might not be a practiced job hunter because you have been successful in your career. So your own success has made you de-skilled or not up to date with contemporary skills and practices around job hunting. Or you might simply be running the gauntlet with only some of the knowledge in mind. And I guess that's a really nice way to segue into our leadership definition in A Career That Soars. So by our founder, Susan Colantuno, leadership is using the greatness in you to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes by engaging the greatness in others. So when I map that over what you do, Renata, it's about saying find their own greatness and really play to that. But the achieving and sustaining extraordinary outcomes is, okay, what are the outcomes that we want? Job, number one, the right job with the right organization, with the right salary and, the right rem and ben and things like that. But the engaging the greatness in others is the piece, isn't it? So those others that you're going to be facing into through this process, it's really important to understand them. And so you really help your clients and our listeners weave. So using leadership all the way through and weave through that process to achieve success for themselves. So let's talk about fear of success, though, because that's the purpose of our chat today. So you've talked about it in your own world and in your own podcast. And what I was fascinated to hear was you talking about the sword of Damocles, which is one of my most favorite stories, parables, myths. And I'm really interested in, let's talk about the sword of Damocles, why people why the fear of success might be getting in their way. And I guess those three key things that you want people to pay attention to in recognizing what might be getting in the way of them being a successful job hunter or successful full stop. Because I think some of this applies no matter what. So
Yes.
tell us about fear of success, and please let's hear about the sword of Damocles as well.
If it's okay with you, I want to take a step back and acknowledge fear of failure because it's there. People do have fear of failure and it's more talked about. And I don't even feel like I need to explain. Of course, people don't want to fail in front of other people. There's this social aspect of failing and people knowing you failed. There's all of that. And it's one of the reasons why it's built into our DNA. It's why we survived as a species. So, it's something that we understand and we know when it's happening. Fear of success, I don't think people understand when it's happening to us.
For them to understand, I guess they have to recognise that A, it's a thing, and B, how does it manifest itself, which I know you're going to talk about. But it's, you really got me thinking about this, and we think about these derailers and you think, okay, so what is this about not wanting to play big?
I think it's you don't even know that you don't want to play big. So I have identified for this podcast because I really want people to go and listen to my other podcast because I see our two podcasts, this episode and the episode I did for my job hunting podcast as part 1 and part 2 of talking about success. And the way that I've continued to think about it is this. Sometimes clients come to me, I'll give 3 examples, right? And 3 ways that I think it showcases that client has a fear of success is when we're talking about their future goals and they stretch out their goals to think, okay, I'm in operations. I may want to be a COO in 10 years' time. And externally, I'm looking at this person and I'm thinking, why not now? It's not every client, but many of my clients could be applying for jobs a bit more senior than the ones that they're aiming for. And they don't even realize it. They already have all the experience, the tools, the expertise needed to apply for jobs that are level above, but they're stretching out the length of their goals. And I believe that there's a fear of success involved in that, in doing that.
So, Renata, do you see a difference across genders in those inability to go, right, I'm ready, I should be going for COO, not, the head of whatever it might be or the general manager?
You would be surprised, but no.
Right, okay.
But then I think that there is a self-selecting process that happens when my male clients reach out to me. They tend to be type Bs as well.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's a vulnerability in accepting coaching.
100%. Absolutely.
And that for women and men, I have a few women that contact me for prospect coaching. They, that no commitment 30-minute call that we all do, and men and women, and they talk to me, but they already feel like they know everything they need to know. They are talking at me, hoping for me to say, no, you don't need me. And I'm like, mate, you do need me quite a lot.
Yeah.
And they don't opt in. And I have a few examples because I keep following those that do not opt in, Michelle, on LinkedIn. And I know that they still don't have jobs, whereas all my clients that have signed up at similar times already have jobs. And I just want to hug that person and reach out to them and say, woman, or man, come and work with me and I'll get you the job you want. And I feel so, what can I do? I can't force them to work with me.
There's a great article on HBR, which I often refer my clients to, particularly the ones who do my Get Shit Done boot camps, which is why you must take time to reflect, even if you really hate it. And I've actually used I'll put the link into the show notes, but one of the pieces out of it is the author says the toughest executives to coach around learning reflective practices are those who absolutely refuse to see the benefit and refuse to do it. And they're not building those EQ muscles and those reflection muscles, which of course we all know we've got to reflect on, what's got me here, because it might not get me there. It just occurred to me that that's often that. And, as someone who is a type A personality, not a type B, I see that. I see that in myself, I'm right. I don't need that. Actually, you do need to step into that, a little bit of humbleness, and that real vulnerability to say, I need some help here. Because we're often not great at asking for help. And it's kind of a visible eek. If I say yes to Renata, that means I'm deficient in some way.
I know, and it's really hard because I know you feel the same. All of our clients are fantastic at what they do. They're exceptional professionals. And that doesn't mean that they know how to find a job. And I wouldn't expect them to, because that's not part of their day-to-day work anyway.
Exactly.
It's really interesting. The second one is when someone is tapped on the shoulder, or there's an opportunity like knocking at the door, and they consider it briefly and they say no. And they talk themselves out of it. So there is this argumentative person inside your head playing up all of these things that will happen to you. And you're going to be successful. You're most likely to succeed, but you still think, oh, it's going to be so much more responsibility. And that, I feel, is very biased towards women. So when women reach out to me, sometimes they're referred to by a recruiter or a headhunter who has called them and said, I have this opportunity for you. And they're like, And they say, oh, why don't you talk to Renata? They call me, oh, such and such said I should talk to you. There's this CFO position and they want me to apply. And then they think about it and they came back to me and think, oh, I just had 2 kids and I don't feel like I can take any more responsibility. When I know in my guts and in my life that there's nothing worse than being a middle manager if you're a mother. If you're stuck in that middle, first of all, you're at risk of redundancy and restructure. You have way more on your plate than your senior execs, and the work is more intense mentally for you. If somebody has identified you as a leader, it's because you probably already have skills. They probably have already seen you perform those leadership skills needed at the top. And you're saying no to that. Why? You will have more resources, more money in the bank. You will take better vacations. There's so many benefits.
And we don't often talk about that stuff. And I'm just nodding away madly, which of course, listeners, you cannot see, but the perception about what it's going to take to lead at the next level versus the reality. And you're so right. We have so many women mired in the middle, or in middle management, and they're not breaking through. Now, there are a whole bunch of factors. And of course, that's my work around fixing systems and bias and barriers and things like that. But also for women, this is a two-way street. Get out of your own damn way. Figure out who can help you silence or quieten, at least for a period of time, that voice in your head that says, not good enough, not ready yet, this will be too hard, whatever, and move into that, I've got to take a risk, and seek the payoffs, or the payoffs that go with leading at that level. That practical stuff, Renata, that you've just pointed out. More resources, less vulnerable, more pay. Let's face it, you got more pay. Suddenly you've got more discretionary spend as a human, but particularly as a woman. Suddenly you've got the ability to outsource, potentially. Everyone makes their own financial decision, but you can outsource some stuff that currently is your responsibility. And I certainly would know that in my career I've outsourced cleaning, for example, because I think, I'm not actually going to spend 25% of my weekends cleaning. I'm going to get someone else to do that because I want to spend that time with my family. Yeah. So anyway, so let's get out of our own damn way.
Yeah, I completely agree. So that happens often, and it tends to happen more with women. And the third and final thing I want to say about fear of success that I have identified is priorities. Now, people may think that this is intertwined with fear of failure. I do not believe so. What I mean by that is this. You apply for a job you really want. You've been applying for a while. Then you get a job interview. Job interview, let's say, is a week from now. but you have a lot on your plate. So what you decide to do is this: I'm going to do everything I need to do this week, and then I'm going to prepare for my job interview. 90% of people do that, and it's the wrong thing to do. Priorities. If you really want that job, that comes first. It's not fear of failure. Fear of failure, we can talk about it in a different episode. This is you having fear of your success. You're postponing the greatest opportunity of your life to get that job. And I have plenty of research, anecdotal data that shows that prepping for an interview is the biggest thing that you can do to get that job. I have several techniques to prep for interview. Many of them have nothing to do with answering behavioral questions in a star format, by the way, which you can Google and find that on your own. But people just postpone it, leave it to the last minute, do when they are tired, and then they don't get the job and then they fail. But I think it's that really like keeping themselves back, like you said before, get out of your way and not understanding what your priorities really are.
That links very strongly to advice that I give often to women, but certainly to our members, advice that I give often to our members around strategic networking, your personal brand, and the assets that you have that enhance your proven and perceived leadership skills. Now, we know that a woman's career success, anyone's career success, but clearly I'm very, very interested in women being successful. Career success is dependent on your proven and your perceived leadership skills. Now, and this is an exercise I run in my women's leadership programs, which is tell me how you prove your leadership skills. I've got a scorecard and I've got this and, I've got a degree in that and yep, good. Now, what about perception? How are you perceived as a leader? Who perceives you as a leader? The people I lead, whatever. I say, okay, well, let's get really clear. Who do you need to perceive you as a leader, ready to lead at the next level, whatever that means? Your boss, your boss's boss, your boss's peers, your boss's boss's peers. Now, how many of those people do you know perceive you as a leader ready to lead, either achieve mastery in your current role, but certainly lead at the next level? And there's often a lot of silence and people go, I hadn't thought about it like that. And I go, okay, so figure out the people who are responsible for your pay, your promotion, and your career advancement have a lot of perceptions about you. You've got to start managing them, which means you need to prioritize the way you are managing your brand. And I'm not talking about your social media profiles, although I will say LinkedIn is where I'm still shocked, Renata, shocked that people don't pay attention to their LinkedIn profiles. But this paying attention and prioritizing me, prioritizing how people perceive me as a leader, perceive me as someone who can take the business forward, whether it's the current business or another business. And it's so important, but it's not being paid attention to. It's really, really interesting.
The way that I explain this to clients, and I've just had a consultation now this morning where we talked about this, is this: we think we're very smart, but we're not that smart. We weren't designed for career progression. We were designed for survival in the savannah. See, you have to bypass some of your instincts to work on your career and you're achieving your preferred future and moving forward in a way that's more intentional. This is a ultra modern, and it's not really how we were genetically designed. So carving out that time needs to be a project for you. And you need to start changing your behaviors and educating your mind and your body to identify that this is important and do an hour a day, 2 hours a week, whatever you can allocate. Not at the end of the week when you're exhausted, treat this as I treat exercise, because for me, exercise is my cross to bear. And if I don't do it early in the morning, I won't do it. So think about career planning and personal branding exercises as something like that. And it's a lot like, the reasons why we don't see a pandemic coming. It's the reason why we don't see climate change coming. It's because it's intangible. It's not right in front of us. It's not that job that you have to do tomorrow. It's not urgent, but it's imminent and it's important, and you will regret it. Future Renata will regret that present Renata has done nothing about it, right? So you have to really work yourself up to do it and start building that behavior and that routine. And it can be very challenging. Sometimes people know what to do, but they just don't do it anyway. And you have to build that up. If people are interested and they're currently job hunting, I actually have a free resource on my website. You can go to my website and download it. It's a designed routine for job hunters. So if you're job hunting full time, just do this routine every day. If you're job hunting part-time, you do this other one, or there's a light version if you have a job and you don't have a lot of time. And if you follow that routine by the book, you will progress much faster than trying to do it randomly and at whatever time suits you. So yeah, it's building that as part of your routine and understanding it's a project. Until it feels like brushing your teeth, it will take a while.
You're right. It's new behaviour. So listeners, there is actionable insight number one, or your call to action number one, which is you must, if you are job hunting or planning to job hunt, you have to prioritise the activities that go with that, not try and fit them in around everything else. If your priority is to earn more, be more fulfilled, find the job of your dreams, you have to prioritise it. Hope is not a strategy, as I like to say. So plan it. And which means planning your week out and saying, well, when am I at my most energized? When am I in flow typically? And block out time to do your job hunting tasks and to learn these new behaviours. So I think it's a really just such an important insight, actionable insight, Renata, because it isn't going to happen just magically. No one's going to sprinkle pixie dust around. The other insight is recognise which skills you have and which skills you do not have and the ones you need to build to be successful. Now, this goes for your career and it goes for job hunting. If you are a skilled, practiced job hunter, you probably have stopped listening already. But if you're not a skilled, practiced job hunter who knows the ins and outs, step into your vulnerable, courageous vulnerability and say, I'm actually going to invest some time, some resources, some effort into becoming skilled so that I can achieve and sustain the outcome that I see as important. And, I had an interview with Narita Summers from Agile last week and I was talking about her career. And one of her pieces of advice is, and I'm paraphrasing, is you've got to make time for yourself. You've got to make time for your career, time for your development, because it isn't actually going to be handed to you on a plate and it isn't going to come to you by osmosis. You actually have to take the time and prioritise it. So thank you, Renata.
I want to add to that, none of these things are crystallized at any point in time. They're always evolving. So if you've been job hunting and then you got a job and you've been in a job for 3 years and now you're job hunting again, oh my God, so much has changed. Like you wouldn't believe. Like CEO opportunities, the first interview is straight to camera. You have 3 minutes, 3 questions, go. Can you do that? Like you haven't done that before. So it's very confronting. And the use of technology now for senior executive level recruitment and selection is it's everywhere. Chat box interviews, bot interviews on your phone. Phone rings, it's a robot. You have 3 minutes to answer this question.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm talking, this is really happening right now. Frankly, I'm only a few meters ahead of you, as a coach. I'm constantly having to catch up, and that's my job, is to be in the know about all of this. So it's not like whatever you're doing, either, even leadership coaching, post-pandemic is different from pre-pandemic. The VUCA environment is more prominent. There's remote, leading from a distance, remote working, all of that entails different skills that you need to acquire. So you always need to be top of your game, really. So yeah, something to think about. And one more reason to find that time to dedicate to your professional development.
It's very good advice. And you're right, because it's interesting. People sometimes, because I don't do any one-on-one coaching anymore. I don't have capacity, but from time to time, say, can you help me with a so-and-so job application, what have you? And I just say, it's just not my thing. I'm not a practice. I'm not in the job market. I'm a director. I'm a business owner, so I'm actually not representative at all or have relevant current lived experience. So, which is, why I talk to you. But
rare that people will send me your resume these days that is ATS compliant.
Now explain what ATS compliant is.
Well, when you apply for jobs online, it's not read by humans. It's read by robots, right? And that requires you to do a type of resume formatting that is easily read by whatever software is behind that interweb world that you can't see. And you don't know what software it is. You don't know if it's a sophisticated one that's better designed or a crappy one. Be very conservative and have a resume format that is easily read by whatever bot. But when that first conversion is done, the second pair of eyes will be human eyes, then it needs to be written in a way that is attractive to the human eye. So there is a technique to it. And I do not expect, if you are an accountant, if you're a marketing professional, if you're a CX professional, I don't expect any of you to know these things, because that would be dumb knowledge for your brain to acquire that you would only use every couple of years.
You're right. It is situational, but gee, I didn't even know that. I mean, I knew that there were robots reading it, but I didn't know about, ATS compliant and what have you.
There's lots of knowledge that I share with you, because if I don't share with you, it will just expire.
Yes.
We all have that in our careers. So there you go.
Okay.
Even if people have never heard about this story, it says so much about how we understand success and what we feel about being a successful person. So Damocles was a man that was in Dionysius' circle, Dionysius being a king. And he was very jealous of Dionysius and wanted to, be more powerful like King Dionysius. And one day Dionysius allowed Damocles to sit on his throne to make Damocles understand what it would feel like to be powerful, to be a king. So Damocles sat on the king's throne, all those luxuries, all that power. But above the throne, there was a sword that was hanged only by a horse's hair. I think that was the thing. So there was that imminent danger of death. And look, even if you have never heard that story, I feel like people think about success like that you're jealous about it and you want to achieve it. But then once you have it, you're so worried you're going to lose it. You're worried that people put you there accidentally by mistake, that you shouldn't be there. I remember being a little child and watching cartoons where there would be this kind of, always this sort of idea where you would rub the genie would show up, you ask for something, the genie misunderstand what you asked for, and you get something completely different. And I feel like when you are successful, that happens to you. You want to be in that successful position, that powerful position, but it's almost like you rubbed the genie the wrong way and you got something completely unexpected that wasn't what you imagine it would be. And from that point onwards, you were uncertain about success and if you ever want to have it again. And then there is this other situation where you always think somebody's going to backstab you. And honestly, all of those things are somewhat true. Right? Even in the way that you think about organizations as a pyramid structure, the only way is down after you reach the apex, but that's all fine. Just understand that before you get there. And if you're still comfortable with all of that uncertainty, with the fact that it will be different, the fairy tale doesn't end when you get that fancy job. It's like, romantic movies, right? The fairy tale doesn't end when you kiss. After that kiss, there's a whole life ahead of you that you need to unravel and you need to work that out. And that's a powerful position, or any position. And it may be that once you reach the top, not everyone is going to like you. And I think that becomes clearer and clearer as you go up the corporate ladder.
That was, I guess, why I loved the link between the parable and job hunting and your advice, is that a mindset of abundance versus scarcity, but also a mindset of what I can achieve versus being scared about what might happen. And I suppose this is, perhaps it's the entrepreneurial mindset. Well, let's give it a shot, because what's the worst that could happen? It could not work, and then we just don't do it anymore. Which I fully acknowledge that if you're the CEO, or not even the CEO, if you're in a really important executive role, that fear of other people, bringing you down or not being successful or things like that. I think it's important to understand what's going to go on for you once you attain that position. And I suppose it's the grant me the serenity to forget about what I can't control and, focus on what you can control, but acknowledge that some of this stuff's going to happen. And I suppose the point I want to make there, Renata, which is what I picked up on, is no, not everyone's going to like you, but your job is not to be liked. Your job is to achieve and sustain extraordinary outcomes for your organisation and also for yourself. And I suppose that's how do we get people beyond that mindset that might be limiting them from doing that?
Yes. And you know what, Michelle? You may sit at that throne and then you won't like it. And it's okay too. But that doesn't mean you can self-select yourself out of that opportunity. Give it a go. Oh, how do I know if I'm ready? Apply. How do I know if I'm going to do it well? Do it. Just do it. And if you have an itch that, or this sort of ambition, you have to give it a go. You really own it to yourself. You only live once. Give it a go. And you're not going to die. It's not like there's a sword on top of you. You're not going to.
I was going to say, there is no sword hanging over. And this is the whole point of the parable, folks listening. There is no sword suspended by a horsehair hanging over your head. And where I wanted to take this now, Renata, is something that you and I have talked about before, and I hear often, in fact, I've heard this just in the last 24 hours. I've been tapped on the shoulder for, someone suggested I go for this job. I've been asked to, I wonder if I should. And I go, for God's sake, put your application in, go for the interview, because until you've got a contract in front of you that has every term, condition, rem, ben that is that you want, until you have a signature ready, waiting for you, a contract waiting for your signature, you have no decision to make, but everything to gain. So what's your advice to, and I will make this gender, particularly to women?
Yeah, I have two pieces of advice here that I think are related to that fear of success and people not knowing what to do when they are being springboarded into something new and potentially successful and interesting. First of all, don't suffer and live in your head. Just go for it. We have this tendency to argue with ourselves and pretend that we're rational. There's this sort of rational arguments that we come up with to pull us out of opportunities, or the reasons why we can't go for it now. Oh, I'm too busy. Oh, my resume isn't ready. Maybe if it had happened at a different time, or there is no better time. There is just a time when things are handed to you and you should just give it a go. And this thing that people feel is completely normal. The fear is very normal. It's the fight and flight situation. And even though we are not going to die, that's how our body perceives a threat or a stress. So we need to just remind ourselves that, again, our body wasn't really designed for urban corporate life. And just understand that fear is natural and we need to overcome it with our minds and being mindful of that instinct that we have.
So that's number one. Don't live in your own head for too long. Think out loud with a trusted confidant. Yep.
So many people play up the whole thing in their heads before applying. And then for that reason, and that's the tip number 2 here, because we have a tendency to have a negative bias when we're thinking, we think about all of the bad things that can happen, all of the difficulties that we will encounter. And it's, again, natural to have a negative bias. And then you decide that you don't want the job even before applying, when in fact, my advice to all job hunters is exactly what you said. Give it a go. Oh, I don't know this company. I don't, maybe I don't fit the criteria exactly. Send your job application, and you won't know until you have a sample of things that have gone well and have gone bad for you. You won't know if your resume is working or not, if you're performing well at interviews or not. You need to have a sample.
That's actually a really good point. Even if you're not 100% convinced that this is the role for you, use it as a testing ground for your resume, for your skills, for your, thinking out loud with a trusted confidant, with Renata. But yeah, use it as a practice run for that big job. But also the advice I'd add to that, which is what I give, is please put yourself in front of a new network of people, because you never know. Once people know you, they can't unknow you. Present yourself as a leader who is great, who achieves outcomes, who is great at engaging the greatness in others, and be memorable, because even if you're not successful this time around for this job, that's okay, because someday one of those people's going, oh, I remember meeting that Renata. Gee, she was great. I know she wasn't right for that role. Let's have a talk to her. Or, you and I both know how important strategic networking is. This is a part of strategic networking with the right others. So I think it's an investment. I look at it like it's an investment in future me.
The way that I explain this, you're absolutely right, is this. You're always playing a short game and a long game when you're job hunting, when you're both the recruiter and the job hunter. The short game is, I need to fill out this position now. The short game for the job hunter is, I need to find a job now. The long game is, I need to have a black book of great contacts for future clients if the recruiter is, a smart recruiter. And the job hunter is, I need to get to know. I mean, this is the silver lining of looking for a job. You're going to do research on different companies as you apply for them. You're going to get to know different people. You're going to get out of your box, expand your network. And something may not convert now, but it will convert in a year, 2 years' time. Who knows?
I would also add to that, and Mel and I did a very short podcast on this a while back, and I used one of my own experiences, which I did say yes to a tap on the shoulder when I was still in corporate Australia, but I used it as a benchmarking exercise because I thought, I'll see what salary is being offered here, because it's going to be very useful for me to know, because I've got a salary negotiation coming up in my own role, and it was brilliant, because then I thought, okay, so this is what I'm worth on the open market because I've been told what I'm worth. I was then able to bring those facts and that data back to my present situation and get what I wanted without having to make a move. So, there are so many benefits for inserting yourself into a process. So many benefits. But yeah, I think that call out, let's get out of our own heads and have a conversation, and external to oneself, conversation with a trusted advisor, but also think about the benefits of the process, not just what could go wrong. And no one likes rejection. We're talking about biology and humans from way back. Of course, rejection from the tribe meant death in when dinosaurs still ran around the world, although some dinosaurs still run around the world. But anyway, it's a whole other story. So we don't want to feel rejected, even if we don't really want the job. But the benefits outweigh that risk in so many different ways. So that's a mindset shift, a real mindset shift. Great call to action. Hey, Renata, we've got so many actionable insights, which is what you and I both, and Susan, Mel, Amal and I are so focused on. We want to give women really good advice that they can take action on. So right now, I'm thinking about the women in a career that soars and women across the world who are saying, we know that there's stuff going on for women in workplaces across the world at the moment. And they're thinking, now might be the time for me to think about a move. I guess what's the very first thing that every single one of those people, even if they're currently in the process, that transition process, what's the first thing that they should be doing?
If they're currently employed, remain employed. As much as possible, remain employed, because it's really about allowing you the investment and the finances to get the support you need to make that move successful for you, and not to put yourself into a different type of stress. So your work may be stressful, but being unemployed for an extended period of time is also stressful. And even though we have a buoyant market at the moment for job hunters, that doesn't mean that for your sector, where you are in the world, things will go easy and you're going to get a job very quickly. Usually people have a very optimistic view of how long it will take for them to get a job. It's usually longer than they think. So that's the first thing that I would say. The second thing that I would say is find a support system that works for you and stick to it. Because people will come to me and work with me, and then if they decide that they want to get advice from somebody else, it might be completely different, and it will just mess up with your mind. So you have to find the best possible support system for you and get the advice that you need, and understand that there is a lot happening in recruitment and selection that is brand new, even to people that are experts in the field, like the technology involved now and how LinkedIn has become the go-to tool for recruiters and headhunters. And understanding how to use those new mechanisms efficiently and effectively to support your job search is really important.
Great advice. Number one, stay employed. Don't put that stress on you, and keep listening to Lead to Soar, because we've actually got an episode coming up, which is Help, I've Got a Rubbish Boss, What do I do? And some of that is about how do I stay employed and preserve. So that's the first one. And then the second one is get that board, that personal board of advisors who are experts. And I think the nugget in there, and I hope you heard it, listeners, but I'm going to repeat it, is get the advice you need to hear. sometimes that's different to what we want to hear. You get the advice you need to hear, which is why people like Renata are so good, because A, you're the expert, but B, you've got that independence to say, hey, Michelle, it's time to have a come to Jesus talk. We need to do some things differently here. So
there are people in your life that you love and that love you back, but they give the worst advice. You probably know some of those in your life, Michelle. They don't mean to give you, they're just not experts and they don't know what they're talking about.
And I also think there's a very real thing around their fear of success, which is projected onto you, which is, I think that's a whole other episode. But so Renata, thank you for your wisdom as always. Fear of success, why it happens and how to get over it. Renata, where else can our listeners track you down?
Well, that's it for this episode. If you're interested in working with me, please check my website, renatabernardi.com. That's RENATABERNARDE.com. There are several services at several different levels, and I hope that one of them will suit you. You can also download the Optimized Job Search Schedule, which we mentioned during the show. That's also available on my website, and the link to it, if you couldn't spell it out, is in the episode show notes. So go check the links. There are links to everything that we mentioned. All the things that I can think of are linked in the episode show notes. And don't forget to listen to Lead to Soar and consider following it and listening to all of their episodes. It's a fantastic platform, not just the podcast, but also A Career That Soars, a great platform for women to grow as leaders. Ciao for now, and until next time, bye.